It was a frigid November night, and I was driving home from a late work shift, the roads more deserted than usual. My car, an old model I'd been nursing along for far too long, hummed steadily beneath me until suddenly, it didn't. The engine sputtered. Warning lights flickered on the dash, and my heart sank. I was in the middle of nowhere, and my phone had conveniently died an hour ago. With a final cough, the car coasted to a silent stop just off a shadowy exit. I got out, the chill wind biting through my jacket, and popped the hood with a shaky hand more out of obligation than any knowledge of mechanics. The engine steamed slightly, an inscrutable hiss escaping from its bowels. Alone, I could only stare hopelessly at the convoluted metal. Resigning to my fate, I decided to seek help. I remembered a service station on a map about a mile back. With no better options, I locked the car and started walking under the oppressive darkness of the starless sky. The road was eerily silent, surrounded by dense woods that seemed to absorb every sound except the crunch of gravel under my feet. My thoughts wandered to every horror story I'd ever heard about deserted roads and dark, wooded areas. Thoughts I quickly tried to suppress. I hadn't walked long when I heard a subtle rustling noise off to my left, deep in the trees. I stopped, straining my ears, and it ceased. I picked up my pace, dismissing it as the wind or a small animal. But then, the rustling started again, louder, closer, as if something large was moving parallel to me. Panic gripped me. I wanted to run, but knew the folly in veering off the relative safety of the roadside. So, I walked faster, my eyes darting frantically about. The noise in the woods kept pace. Suddenly, ahead in the beam of a streetlight, I saw the silhouette of a person standing in the middle of the road. My breath caught, relief and fear mingled as I approached, desperate for any help but wary of the stranger's intentions. As I neared, the figure stepped into the light. A woman, middle-aged, her clothes ragged and face eerily calm. She stared past me, her eyes unfocused. "Car broke down," I explained, voice quivering. "Can you help?" She continued to stare through me for a moment before her lips moved. "Go back," she whispered hoarsely. Confused, I asked, "Is there no service station?" Her next words sent a shiver down my spine. "Not safe. Go back to your car. Now." Before I could respond, a chilling howl rose from the direction of the woods, cutting through the night. Fear took over, and I turned on my heel, sprinting back toward my car, the woman's cryptic warning echoing in my mind. I reached my car out of breath, heart pounding. I locked myself in and curled up in the back seat, eyes wide, watching, waiting. Eventually, my fear-exhausted body gave in to sleep. Come morning, I found my car surrounded by fresh, large animal tracks that hadn't been there the night before. The tow truck arrived soon after. I didn't mention the woman or the sounds. Some horrors are better left unshared, but I never drove that road again, especially not at night.
It was an unusually cold November evening when I decided to take a shortcut home from work through the new bike path that cut alongside the old railway tracks. The city had recently converted it into a paved trail, claiming to rejuvenate the area, yet it still retained a desolate feel after dark. Illuminated only by sparse, dim streetlights, the path ahead promised a quicker, if not slightly unnerving, journey. As I walked, the wind whispered through the branches of gnarled trees, their shadows dancing on the ground, playing tricks on my eyes. I tightened my coat around me and quickened my pace, eager to escape the unsettling chill and the feeling of isolation. Every rustle in the underbrush seemed amplified in the quiet night, causing my heart to skip a beat repeatedly. Halfway through, near the darkest part of the path where the light seemed to fear to tread, I saw a figure. At first, it was just a shape, a darker patch against the night, stationary and silent. As I approached, details emerged. A man, tall and thin, wearing a long coat, his face obscured by the hood. He stood off to the side, his head tilted as if listening to the wind. I considered turning back but rationalized it was just another person, perhaps enjoying a late-night stroll like me, albeit a bit peculiar at this hour. However, as I passed him, a cold dread washed over me. He turned his head slowly, tracking my movement, and that's when I noticed he wasn't just listening to the wind, he was murmuring softly, a language I couldn't understand, his voice a low, haunting cadence. My steps faltered for a moment, curiosity pinning me in place despite my fear. The words seemed ancient, echoing strangely in the air, sending shivers down my spine. Regaining my senses, I hurried away, not daring to look back. My heart pounded in my chest as if trying to escape. The path suddenly felt endless, each step forward accompanied by a rush of panic. I imagined him turning to follow me, his strange chant summoning something unseen and malevolent. Finally, the end of the path came into view, the lights of the city a welcoming glow against the dark. I burst onto the well-lit street, the normalcy of the night returning as cars passed by and people walked their dogs, oblivious to the nightmare lurking just beyond the shadows. I glanced back one last time. The path lay empty. The man was gone as if he had never been there. Relief washed over me, yet the echo of his voice haunted me all the way home. I locked my door behind me, every noise of my apartment startling me until dawn began to creep through the blinds. I've avoided that path ever since, taking the longer route through the bustling streets, where the presence of others offers a comforting shield against the dark. But every windy night, as leaves rustle like whispered words, I wonder about the man, his strange chants, and what darkness they may have called forth from the shadows.
It was late October, the time of year when the crisp chill of autumn settles in and the days noticeably shorten. I had just moved into a small, affordable apartment on the edge of town, a place that bordered a dense swath of forest known locally as the Hollows. The locals whispered about it, saying it wasn't just the cold that made the Hollows unsettling after dark. One evening, feeling adventurous, I decided to explore. I ventured onto a narrow trail that wound its way into the heart of the woods, my smartphone flashlight my only source of illumination. The further I walked, the more the atmosphere thickened, the air felt heavy, laden with an unspoken warning. The path curved deeper into the woods, and that's when I heard it, a low, continuous whisper floating on the breeze. At first, I thought it was just the wind, but as I paused, the sound clarified into a distinct voice. The words were indistinct, a murmur just beyond comprehension. My rational mind urged me to dismiss it as my imagination, fueled by the local legends and the eerie setting. However, curiosity overcame my initial fear, and I pushed forward, drawn towards the sound. As I continued, the path dipped into a small clearing where the moonlight broke through the canopy in scattered beams. That's when I saw her. A woman, draped in a flowing, gossamer gown that seemed to glow faintly in the moonlight, stood in the center of the clearing. Her back was to me, and she appeared to be the source of the whispers. "Hello," I called out, my voice quivering slightly. She didn't respond, nor did she move. My feet moved of their own accord, drawing me closer until I was just a few yards away. The whispering stopped abruptly, and the silence that followed was suffocating. The air grew colder, and I could see my breath in the air as I exhaled, watching it swirl around me in the moonlight. Slowly, she turned to face me. Her eyes were hollow, dark pits that seemed to absorb the light around her face pale and drawn. I froze, caught in her gaze, unable to move or look away. She reached out a hand towards me, her fingers skeletal, as if beckoning me closer. Panic surged within me, breaking the trance. I stumbled backward, turning and running as fast as my legs could carry me back towards the path. I didn't dare look back, my heart pounding in my ears louder than my footsteps crashing through the underbrush. The cold air burned my lungs as I burst out of the tree line and onto the street where my apartment building offered sanctuary. I locked the door behind me, leaning against it as I tried to catch my breath. The image of her hollow eyes burned into my memory. I stayed up that night, lights blazing, jumping at every sound. By morning, the terror had subsided slightly, rationalizing it as a trick of the light or a figment of my overactive imagination. But I never walked in the hollows again, especially not in October, when the veil between worlds is said to be thinnest. Sometimes, when the wind is just right, I think I can still hear her whispers, floating on the breeze, calling me back to the clearing in the woods.